Time, as it passes, is often seen as something to be managed, controlled, and bent to our will. In our younger years, we measure it by goals, milestones, and achievements. Time is a resource, a currency that must be spent wisely if we are to live full lives. But when you cross the threshold into your 50s, time itself begins to change. The relentless pursuit of accomplishment slows, and with it comes a different way of seeing the world. When you are younger, time is something that stretches ahead of you, a vast open field where possibilities are endless, and every moment is a step towards something new. The future looms large, and there's always something on the horizon to chase. But in your 50s, time no longer feels like something you need to chase. It begins to feel like a gift, a treasure that must be appreciated rather than merely used. C.S. Lewis, with his gift for seeing life in a broader perspective, understood that time is not just a force that moves forward. It is a lens through which we view the world. He wrote, "The future is something which everyone reaches at the rate of 60 minutes an hour. Whatever he does, whoever he is, time in this sense is impartial. It does not discriminate, it does not hurry, nor does it slow. It simply moves. And it is only as we age that we realize that it is not what we do with time, but how we use it that shapes our lives." Before we continue, please remember to subscribe below to stay up to date with our latest videos. Every subscribe, like, and comment helps us keep the C.S. Lewis channel going. Now, keep listening. In our younger years, we strive. We work hard to make something of ourselves. But as we move past 50, the need to strive diminishes. Instead, time becomes an opportunity to reflect, to look back with gratitude, and to understand the depth of the moments we have lived. The energy of youth may be gone, but what we gain in its place is something more precious: wisdom. It is in these years that we begin to understand the meaning of Lewis' famous words: "You are never too old to set another goal or to dream a new dream." Time is no longer a ticking clock marking off the seconds of a life yet to be lived. It becomes a peaceful companion that offers you the space to think, to reflect, and to make new decisions, not out of necessity, but out of desire. This is not a resignation to old age, but an embracing of it. In the later stages of life, we are given the chance to savor time, not just to fill it. And with the savoring comes a new awareness. We start to notice things we missed in the rush of younger days. The subtle shift in the sky at dawn. The fragrance of a flower that blooms unnoticed when we're too busy to pause. The quiet joy of a conversation with an old friend. The peaceful silence that arrives when the noise of the world has receded into the background. Time is a great teacher, but unfortunately it kills all its pupils, Lewis quipped, reminding us of the inevitable nature of time's passage. And yet, in its passage, it also brings something we rarely recognize when we are younger: peace. The constant striving for more, for better, for different fades, and we begin to accept that what we have is enough. In your 50s, you begin to understand the beauty of a quiet moment, the beauty of being content. Perhaps for the first time, you feel the weight of gratitude in your heart. You begin to see that the achievements of your youth, the struggles you overcame, and the relationships you have nurtured, all of these things have led you here to a place of quiet satisfaction. You no longer need to chase the future. It is enough to live fully in the present, to appreciate the time you have left, and to know that it is a gift. C.S. Lewis, in his reflections on life, often spoke of the value of the present moment. You can make a lot of plans, but only God knows the outcome. The real question is whether you will follow His plan, trust in His goodness, and let Him guide you in the direction He has chosen for you. It is in this season of life that the truth of these words becomes evident. You no longer need to make grand plans or chase after elusive goals. What you need is trust. Trust in God's will. Trust in His purpose for your life. And trust that He will guide you, even when the path is unclear. As time passes, we learn to let go. The drive to prove ourselves diminishes, and in its place comes the realization that our worth is not measured by our accomplishments, but by our faith, our love, and our willingness to serve. The years behind us were a preparation for this season, a season of grace, reflection, and spiritual growth. In your 50s and beyond, the journey does not end. It changes, it shifts, and it opens up to something deeper. You are no longer racing toward an unknown future. Instead, you are walking in the light of the knowledge that though time is fleeting, God's love endures forever. As you reach the age of 50 and beyond, there's a subtle but undeniable shift in how you experience your faith. The questions that once seemed so pressing, what is my purpose? What is my calling? Are not answered with the same urgency. Instead, you begin to see faith as a journey, not toward an ultimate destination, but as an ongoing unfolding. Spiritual growth at this stage is less about acquiring new knowledge or understanding, and more about allowing the knowledge you already have to deepen and settle into the marrow of your bones. It becomes a faith that is no longer dependent on certainty, but on trust. C.S. Lewis understood this well. He wrote in his later years about how, in youth, faith can be an eager, almost anxious pursuit, a search for answers, for reassurance, for confirmation of the truths you believe. But as you grow older, you begin to see that faith isn't always about the answers. It is about learning to trust the one who holds the answers, even when they aren't immediately visible to us. You can never get a cup of tea large enough or a book long enough to suit me, he said, illustrating his own thirst for understanding. But he also emphasized the importance of accepting that not all knowledge is meant for us to grasp fully in this lifetime. At 50 and beyond, your faith may have matured into something quieter, but it is no less profound. It is like a tree with deep roots, no longer swayed by every passing storm, but standing strong through all seasons. The trials of life have provided the nourishment needed to grow that faith into something solid, something that doesn't require constant proof, but is rather sustained by the trust you have in God's character. This is a season of reflection. You begin to see how God's hand has guided you throughout your life. In the moments of joy and in the moments of pain, you see His fingerprints on your story. C.S. Lewis in The Problem of Pain addresses how suffering, when understood in the light of God's love, is not something to fear, but a way through which we grow closer to Him. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is His megaphone to rouse a deaf world, Lewis wrote. The years over 50 often bring the reality of loss of loved ones, loss of vitality, loss of dreams that never came to fruition. But in the midst of this loss, you begin to understand, perhaps for the first time, what it means to trust God fully, not for what you want from Him, but simply because of who He is. In your earlier years, faith was often a transaction, a way to ensure blessings, a way to get through life's challenges. But as you grow older, faith becomes a surrender, You surrender your need to control, your need for answers, and your need to always be in charge. In exchange, you receive peace, a peace that surpasses understanding. This peace is not born out of circumstances, but out of trust. It is the peace that comes from knowing that God's plan is good, even when we cannot see it. It's the peace that allows us to accept the changes of aging, not as an enemy, but as a part of the divine unfolding. And in this peace, you are able to see life more clearly. You begin to recognize that spiritual growth is not about accumulating knowledge, but about becoming more attuned to God's presence in the everyday moments. In the second half of life, you have an opportunity to shift your focus from striving to being. This is not to say that there is no work to be done or no purpose to fulfill. On the contrary, this season can be one of incredible fruitfulness, but it is a fruitfulness that flows out of a life surrendered to God's will, rather than one desperately trying to make something of itself. This is where true spiritual maturity lies, not in the pursuit of success, but in the acceptance of God's love and the invitation to love others in return. One of the most difficult and inevitable aspects of aging is the constant reminder that change is unavoidable. As you approach your 50s and beyond, the changes in your life become more pronounced, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And yet, rather than viewing these changes with dread or resistance, it is in this very period of life that we can begin to understand the deep truth of what it means to accept change. C.S. Lewis often reflected on the nature of change in his works, particularly in the Screwtape Letters, where he noted that the human tendency to resist change was one of the most powerful tools of temptation. We cling to the past, to what we know, and in doing so, we miss out on the opportunities that new seasons bring. In many ways, life over 50 offers a unique opportunity for spiritual growth, precisely because it brings change we cannot avoid. As much as we might wish to remain young, there is something inherently liberating in accepting the natural flow of time. For Lewis, the acceptance of change was not about passively letting life pass by. Instead, it was about embracing change as part of God's divine order. God is the only comfort, he wrote, but he is also the supreme terror, the thing we most need and the thing we most want to hide from. In this, Lewis acknowledges that change often brings discomfort, but it is also through this discomfort that we find the most profound opportunities for growth. In our 50s and beyond, we are presented with a choice: to either resist the changes of age and feel a sense of loss, or to accept them and embrace the new seasons of life. It's easy to focus on the losses, the loss of physical strength, the loss of certain dreams or ambitions, the loss of people who were once a part of your daily life. But in doing so, we miss the great gift that change offers, the opportunity to grow into a new version of ourselves, one that is perhaps more compassionate, more present, and more attuned to the eternal rather than the fleeting. Change in this light is not a loss. It is a doorway. It is a passage into a deeper understanding of who we are and whose we are. As we age, our perspective shifts. We begin to see things in a broader, more eternal context. We realize that our identity is not rooted in what we do, but in who we are in Christ. Our purpose does not end when our career or physical vitality fades. On the contrary, this is a time to discover new purposes, new roles, and new ways to serve those around us. C.S. Lewis recognized that real change often comes from the deepest parts of ourselves, those parts that may have remained hidden in earlier years. In his own life, he experienced profound transformation after personal loss, particularly after the death of his wife, Joy Davidman. He wrote in A Grief Observed, "No one ever told me that grief felt so like fear. I am not afraid, but the sensation is like being afraid." The changes that came with this loss were not only painful but also transformative. Through his grief, Lewis experienced a deeper intimacy with God. His faith became more mature, more robust, and more willing to accept the mysteries of life. The changes you experience in your 50s and beyond, though they may be difficult at times, carry with them the same potential for transformation. Perhaps you are now facing the loss of a loved one, a shift in health, or a change in your sense of purpose. But in these changes, God offers you the opportunity to deepen your relationship with Him. In the stillness that often accompanies this time of life, you are invited to listen more attentively to His voice and to follow His lead into new paths of service and love. As you grow older, you begin to appreciate the changes of life in a way that you never did before. The challenges of aging, the limitations that may come, the shifts in relationships, all of these things become a part of the larger tapestry of God's unfolding plan for your life. You start to see, in a way that only age can teach, that change is not the enemy. It is the vehicle through which God shapes and refines us. It is through change that we learn to let go of our attachments to the material world and place our trust fully in Him. In this season of life, you have the unique opportunity to reflect on the fullness of your journey. You can see where God's hand has been evident in the twists and turns, in the seasons of joy and sorrow, and in the moments of quiet grace. And you begin to understand that each phase of life has been a gift, whether it was a time of abundance or a time of loss. To embrace change is to embrace the fullness of life, knowing that God is with you every step of the way. His presence is unchanging, even when everything around you shifts. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, and today, and forever. Hebrews 13:8 tells us, and it is in this unshakable truth that we find the strength to accept the changes of aging and embrace them as opportunities for a spiritual renewal. As you enter the stage of life where the years behind you seem more numerous than the ones ahead, the question of purpose often arises. What is left to accomplish when the hustle of youth has faded? What is your role now when your career has settled? Your children may be grown, and the rush of daily tasks has slowed down. This is a question many face in their 50s and beyond, and yet it is in these years that the most profound understanding of purpose can emerge. C.S. Lewis, with his characteristic wisdom, never believed that purpose was bound by age. In fact, he wrote in The Silver Chair, "You are never too old to set another goal or to dream a new dream." This is a revolutionary thought, especially in a world that often views aging as a decline into irrelevance. But Lewis, through his own life and writings, demonstrated that our calling does not fade with age. It simply evolves. When we are young, we often equate purpose with achievement, building a career, raising a family, acquiring success. But as we grow older, we come to realize that purpose is not about accumulating things or accolades. It is about how we live, how we serve, and how we love. In our 50s and beyond, our understanding of purpose shifts from doing to being, from the rush to accomplish to the call, to live in deep alignment with our values and with God's will. One of the greatest gifts of this season of life is the opportunity to rediscover the joys of purpose that are not tied to productivity. Many people, particularly those in their 50s, find themselves re-evaluating their lives. The things they thought would bring lasting fulfillment may seem less important now, while deeper, more lasting sources of purpose become clearer. Perhaps it is in the quiet moments with family, in mentoring younger people, in volunteering for causes close to the heart, or in growing spiritually and emotionally that we begin to see the true purpose of life. We begin to understand that our role in the grand tapestry of creation is not about doing, but about being. It is about being present for others, offering wisdom and insight where we can, and living in a way that reflects the love of God. Lewis spoke often of the importance of others in our lives, of community, of relationships. He believed that one's purpose was never to be isolated, but always intertwined with those around us. Even as we age, we continue to be an integral part of the community of believers and the world at large. In fact, the later years of life are often when we realize that our purpose was never just for ourselves. It was always about others. Whether in raising children, helping others in their faith journey, or simply offering support to those in need, purpose is found in the way we serve. And that service doesn't stop just because you've reached a certain age. It only takes on a new form, one that is more rooted in reflection and spiritual depth than ever before. You may not be running marathons or climbing corporate ladders, but your purpose still burns bright. You have lived through struggles, joys, and triumphs, and with each experience, you have gained wisdom and insight. You now have the opportunity to share that wisdom with others, to live out your faith in new and profound ways. Purpose in the later years often becomes less about what you achieve and more about how you influence those around you through your example and your words. When you reach 50 and beyond, you begin to understand that your role is far from finished. It's simply changing. The years behind you have shaped who you are, but the years ahead of you hold the possibility of a deeper, more meaningful purpose. And this purpose, as Lewis would have said, is not about achieving or doing, but about being a vessel for God's love and wisdom. You are called to continue reflecting God's light into the world, wherever you are, and whatever your circumstances. In C.S. Lewis' later years, he wrote extensively about the transformative power of faith, particularly as one ages. In The Great Divorce, he talks about the gradual shedding of earthly attachments and the freedom that comes when we begin to grasp the eternal truths of God's kingdom. The older we get, the more we realize that life's purpose is not to hold tightly to this world, but to prepare ourselves for the one to come. Yet, this does not mean that we disengage from the world around us. On the contrary, it means that our purpose is now to live with eternal truths in mind, not merely for our own sake, but for the sake of others. You may now find yourself in a position where you have the ability to impact others in a deeper way. It's never too late to guide, to mentor, or to offer your wisdom. Perhaps you are becoming more involved in church ministries, social causes, or local efforts to serve your community. There is no end to what you can contribute. But instead of the frantic race of youth, this time in life allows you to contribute with deeper insight, greater patience, and a willingness to see the world through a divine perspective. In this way, you find that your purpose is not diminished, but transformed. You begin to embrace the idea that God has used your entire life to bring you to this moment, where your greatest calling is not to do more, but to be more present, more loving, and more committed to living out His will for you. As you grow older, the world around you begins to look different. The things that once occupied your thoughts and dreams The pursuit of success, the race to accomplish, the scramble to achieve, start to fade in significance. The demands of youth give way to the quiet realities of the present. You may find that your body no longer responds in the way it once did, or that the roles you once played in your career and family life are now changing. These changes, however, are not to be feared, but embraced. They are an invitation to enter into a new season, a season where the purpose of life is seen in a more profound light. C.S. Lewis understood the beauty of new beginnings, even in the later years of life. In his essay, The Four Loves, he writes, "The great thing is to stop regarding all the unpleasant things as interruptions of one's own or real life. The truth is, of course, that what one calls the interruptions are precisely one's real life. The life God is sending one day by day. The life, this in essence is the invitation of aging. It's an invitation to see that what you have always called interruptions are not distractions from life, but the very substance of it. In the years after 50, the interruptions are the life you are meant to live. You are no longer running toward a distant goal, but are invited to embrace the present with all its changes and challenges. Life over 50 is not about returning to the past or holding tightly to the former seasons. It is about accepting the wisdom that the later years offer, wisdom that brings clarity and peace. The youthful ideal of being constantly in motion, always striving for more, slowly gives way to a deeper understanding that life is not measured by what we achieve, but by how we live, how we love, and how we serve. Change in this season may come in many forms. You may face the loss of loved ones, the fading of health, or the shifting of roles within your family. But in all these changes, there is an invitation to deeper faith, to greater trust in God's plan. The new season of life calls you to embrace a different kind of activity, not one of frantic pursuit, but one of deep contemplation, prayer, and intentional service. In the quiet of the later years, you begin to see the world through new eyes. You may find yourself more reflective, more patient, and more present in each moment. You realize that your life is not to be lived in haste, but in harmony with God's will. Each day becomes a new opportunity to serve, to reflect, and to grow spiritually. And it is through this slow, steady growth that you come to understand the deeper purposes of life. As C.S. Lewis pointed out, the later stages of life can often be the richest and most fruitful. We are not called to shrink back in fear or retreat from the changes we face. Instead, we are called to step into them with faith and courage. The challenges of aging, though real, are not obstacles to our spiritual journey, but opportunities to grow in ways we could never have anticipated when we were younger. They offer us a new way to live, a new way to serve, and a new way to reflect God's glory in our lives. There is perhaps no greater truth about aging than this. Peace does not come from certainty, but from surrender. The older we become, the more we realize how little control we have over the world around us. No matter how carefully we plan, no matter how much we prepare, there are always surprises, always changes that we cannot anticipate. It is in the acceptance of this uncertainty that we find peace, the kind of peace that passes understanding. C.S. Lewis was no stranger to uncertainty. Throughout his life, he experienced profound loss and grief, the death of his mother, the devastation of war, and the loss of his beloved wife, Joy. And yet, in the midst of these losses, he found a deeper, more abiding peace that came not from understanding the reasons behind the suffering, but from surrendering to the fact that God is in control. In his work, A Grief Observed, Lewis wrote, "Grief is like a storm. It comes, it hits, and it leaves. It never leaves you untouched, but it teaches you to weather the storm." This is a powerful truth. The uncertainty of life, whether it comes in the form of aging, loss, or change, is not something to fear, but something to embrace, knowing that through it all, God is with us. In the later years of life, you may find yourself more aware of the fragility of life, more attuned to the passing of time. But instead of becoming anxious or fearful, this awareness can lead you to a deeper trust in God's providence. As you face the uncertainty of the future, you learn to trust that God holds all things in His hands. You no longer need to control the outcome of every situation, because you know that His will is greater than your own. Lewis often spoke of the peace that comes from trusting God, even when the future is unclear. He understood that the human desire for certainty is natural, but he also recognized that it is through faith that we are able to weather the storms of life. We are all, at the end of the day, in God's hands. Lewis wrote, acknowledging that despite our best efforts, the outcome of our lives is not for us to control. It is for us to trust. And it is in this trust, this surrender, that we find the deepest peace. As you move through life's later stages, this peace becomes more than just a comfort. It becomes a strength that allows you to face the uncertainties of aging with confidence. A strength that lets you release the need to control your future and embrace the beauty of living each day in faith. As you reach your 50s and beyond, there is a powerful truth that begins to unfold. The more you trust in God's plan, the more joy you find in simply living. This may seem counterintuitive, especially in a world that constantly tells you to plan, to control, and to manage every aspect of your life. But in the quiet surrender of trust, you begin to experience a deep and abiding joy that comes from knowing God holds your life in His hands. It is not about understanding everything. It is about trusting that everything is already known to Him. C.S. Lewis, in his later years, frequently explored the idea of divine trust. In Mere Christianity, he spoke about the role of faith in the Christian life, emphasizing that it is not our job to figure out life's answers, but to trust in the one who knows all. The act of surrender is the act of saying, I trust that God will do what is good for me, even when I don't understand it. Lewis wrote, this surrender, Lewis explained, is not passive. It is active trust, a daily choosing to believe that God's plans for us are good, even when they lead us through suffering or unexpected change. It is easy, as you grow older, to feel as though your time is running out. Many people in their 50s or beyond wrestle with the idea that they are too old to start something new, too old to make a difference, too old to live with vitality. But Lewis would challenge this mindset. He believed that there is no time limit on God's purpose for us, no expiration date on the work He has for us to do. The joy of living fully at any age comes from realizing that God has plans for you, no matter where you are in life. Every moment of life, no matter how many years you have lived, is a new opportunity to trust Him and experience His love. This is the joy that comes from trust, a joy that cannot be taken away by age, circumstance, or change. It is the joy of knowing that, while the seasons of life may shift, God's love and purpose for your life remain constant. This joy is a gift that grows stronger with time, because as you age, you come to realize that the things you once thought were necessary for happiness, success, achievement, wealth, recognition, pale in comparison to the joy of knowing that God is with you, that He holds your life in His hands, and that He will never leave you nor forsake you. Living fully in your later years means embracing God's timing. You may not have the energy of your youth, but you have wisdom. You may not have the same physical strength, but you have experience. And with these gifts comes the ability to serve in new ways. Just as Lewis in his later years found new ways to share his faith and wisdom, so too can you. Your calling is not over. In fact, it may be just beginning. In The Weight of Glory, C.S. Lewis wrote, "There are no ordinary people. You have never talked to a mere mortal. As you reflect on your years, consider the impact you've had on others. Whether through raising children, teaching, mentoring, or simply being a quiet presence, your life has been meaningful in ways you may not even realize. Your legacy is not measured in accolades or accomplishments, but in the lives you have touched and the love you have shared. It is in this season of life that you have the opportunity to leave a lasting legacy. A legacy not of material wealth or worldly success, but of faith, love, and service. You may not be in a position to make grand gestures, but you can make a difference in the lives of those around you, just as Lewis did with his words and his example. There is no retirement from the work of the kingdom of God. Your purpose remains not to achieve, but to love and serve. And in that service you will find joy. The joy of living fully in your later years comes from the freedom to let go of the burdens of self-importance and success. It comes from the realization that your value is not defined by what you do or how much you accomplish, but by who you are in Christ. This freedom allows you to embrace each day with peace and contentment, knowing that your purpose is eternal and that your life has meaning in the eyes of God. As you continue on this journey of life over 50, remember that this season is not one of decline, but of deepening. It is a time of spiritual renewal, of discovering new purposes, and of experiencing the joy of living fully in God's love. Trusting in God's plan, embracing the changes that come with age, and living out your purpose with faith and grace. This is the path you are called to walk. Let go of any fear or doubt that tells you you are too old to make a difference. Your life, as long as it lasts, is filled with purpose. Every day is a new opportunity to serve, to reflect God's love, and to share your wisdom and kindness with those around you. Remember, you are never too old to set another goal or to dream a new dream. Your legacy is not what you accomplish, but how you love. You are still capable of making a profound impact on the world, and through it all, you can rest in the joy that comes from trusting God's plan. We hope you've been inspired by the reflection on life after 50. How have you embraced the changes that come with age? What purpose do you feel called to in this new season of life? Share your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe to the C.S. Lewis channel for more reflections on life, faith, and purpose. Your support helps us continue to share these meaningful stories. Stay tuned for more content